This is the future.
Before anything else, I would like to greet you a happy new year. Thank you for all the wonderful experiences during 2022, and I am hoping we will experience more fun memories together this 2023. So, the topic for today is meta in 2023. Last year was full of surprises, and the biggest ones are those big-time nerfs to the meta in Warframe, so, it's very intriguing to ask now if those meta are still meta right now. Well, obviously they aren't meta, Captain Obvious, because they got nerfed. What a dumb question. Yes, it may be dumb, but you'll be surprised to see that some things in Warframe never change. Let's take for example the Ignis Wraith, the Wraith version of the Ignis Flamethrower, featuring improved critical chance, status chance, and magazine size. This is a mastery rank 9 weapon, which makes it a highly new player-friendly weapon. This alone makes it a very reliable weapon for all players since it's very accessible. This weapon was first awarded from Operation, the Pacifism Defect event. The exact form in which the weapon can be acquired differs depending on the level of participation during the event. All participating players in clans that achieved the specified clan participation score, for example 260 for Ghost clans, received an Ignis Wraith blueprint at the end of the event. All players in a clan that achieved the specified victory score during the event, for example 4000 for Ghost clans, immediately received a complete Ignis Wraith with a free weapon slot and a pre-installed Ogin catalyst. Clans that placed within the top 10% scoring clans in their tier received research for the Ignis Wraith in the Clan Dojo's Chemelab at the end of the event. But in 2019, Digital Extremes added a fully built Ignis Wraith being potentially sold by Baro Kitir in the concourse section of the Tenno Relay for 250,000 credits and 550 Orogin ducats. Note that Baro Kitir's stock changes with each appearance, and this weapon may not be available on a succeeding appearance. Then in 2021, they added the yearly February Star Days event that sold the blueprint from Ticker in Fortuna for 25 advances Death Bond. Then it got even accessible when Digital Extremes added the blueprint to Vale Proxima Grineer controlled territory abandoned derelict caches in Empyrean missions. And finally, after the Veilbreaker update, it got permanently added to all clan dojos. This version requires the clan to be rank 10, and its research is 3 times more costly than the version obtained from the Pacifist Defect. However, the blueprint is not tradable, but it's still highly accessible since as a new player, all you need to do is join an active clan that is rank 10, get the blueprint, build it in your foundry, and then burn everything in normal star chart levels. In fact, I can say that the Ignis build is still a very powerful weapon in low to mid levels, and can help you progress to Steel Path levels easily, except for some boss fights of course, because some requires accuracy and high damage to specific body parts, which is one of the biggest downside of Ignis Wraith. It can burn mobs in seconds, but it would take a lot of time killing mini-bosses and even bosses in some of the planets in Star Chart missions. Nonetheless, I think it's safe to say that Ignis Wraith is still meta right now, and very reliable for Warframe players for progression. I mean, who don't like to use a flamethrower at early levels that is more reliable than your waifu gal, if you know what I mean. In terms of build, the most probably early build for Ignis Wraith is just slap the usual damage, multi-shot, element, and then critical mods that you have. At early levels, there is no such thing as the right build since everything dies, especially if you already unlocked any armor and shield stripping feature in the game. Everything dies with burn damage right now if they don't have any defense. And enemies in Warframe aren't that bullet sponge anymore. You could say that there are still those reworked Eximus units, but honestly, in normal star chart levels, those overguard that they have are useless. Okay, I get how great Ignis Wraith in low to mid level squad leader, but how about Steel Path levels? There are 2 things that made Ignis Wraith less powerful in Steel Path and beyond levels. The most recent AoE nerf did affect the Ignis Wraith, as Digital Extremes thinks that beam weapons have wide area of effect and should be considered for big nerf. They implemented the low ammo pickup for the Ignis Wraith and now, it can only pick up 40 ammo. Then, the maximum ammunition of the weapon has been adjusted from 800 to only 200 right now, which is a big slap for those who are always running an Ignis Wraith setup. Aside from that, the ammo changes alone weren't enough to significantly change things for AoE weapons like the Ignis Wraith. So instead of tightening these values to be overly restrictive, the developer chose to address other factors that make these weapons so strong, such as headshot damage. Their approach here is twofold: to reduce the impact of headshots for our weapons, but to also make precision headshots pack a larger punch overall. Radial damage no longer gains extra headshot damage or triggers headshot conditions. This is primarily targeted at the Ignis Wraith. As a flamethrower weapon, it's hard to imagine a blanket of elements being precise enough to target weak points specifically. Explosive projectiles themselves can still land headshots, so there is still a reason to aim with most weapons for maximum damage. Right? I fully understand Digital Extreme's logic about how a wall of fire couldn't hit a weak point specifically when it would specifically hit everything including the weak point if it's in the area of effect. This is an absolute Chad move, right? It totally makes perfect sense, right? But all jokes aside, Ignis Wraith can still go up against Steel Path levels, but I don't know about level cap anymore. Specific setup like something that can strip all defenses, and buff the weapon damage of Ignis Wraith will be very good for level cap, but it will not hit like before. It will not melt level cap enemies faster than it was before, but this doesn't mean that Ignis Wraith is trash in Steel Path. To put it in perspective, there are better weapons to kill enemies faster in level cap aside from Ignis Wraith. How about Galvanized Setup? How about Heat Inherit? How about it? What are those? I'm just kidding. Galvanized Aptitude does work with the Ignis Wraith. You apply status with any primer gun first, then hit them with the Ignis Wraith afterwards. If you add this to your setup with defense strip and weapon buff, probably you will deal massive damage to a level cap enemy. Now, how about Heat Inherit Squad Leader? I am new, so what is it? Since Ignis Wraith deals primarily heat damage, it's a candidate for Heat Inherit. The idea is like this: the first heat proc should be a secondary, because it has the highest heat percentage with primed heated charge. The heat percentage from the DPS weapon matters only for proc priority and to continue applying heat stacks. Its heat percentage isn't taken into account for Heat Inherit. Heat Inherit uses base damage of the weapon you're currently applying heat stacks with. The heat percentage and faction percentage from the weapon to apply the first heat stack get added to your DPS weapon and will use its base damage for calculations after heat stacks get refreshed by its procs. Damage gets multiplied again by the faction percentage of the DPS weapon. In short, if you apply the first heat stack with a 225% heat with primed heated charge and scorch and 55% faction secondary and continue applying more procs with a 55% faction DPS weapon, heat stacks will use the base damage of the DPS weapon, 225% heat and 55% faction from the secondary, and multiply everything by the DPS weapon's 55% faction. Long story short, Ignis Wraith is merely a tool for the Heat Inherit mechanic. It's the weapon you will use to apply more damage to the secondary weapon if you want to have the most damage output from the Heat Inherit mechanic in the game. Most players do melee and secondary, or even primary and secondary, but it's always the secondary weapon that will be the primary damage dealer. In the case of Ignis Wraith, you can also use a melee weapon and Ignis Wraith. You can apply heat procs in your melee first, then kill them with Ignis Wraith afterwards. Testing the Ignis Wraith after the nerfs was a big bummer, as you can really feel the big time loss. But still, because of specific setup, Ignis Wraith still remains powerful in Steel Path levels and beyond, and in terms of low to mid level, it's still the most reliable weapon in the game, so I can say that even after the nerf, Ignis Wraith will remain meta in Warframe for as long as it's accessible to the players. Thank you so much for watching. Squad Leader signing off.